bringing to share with any particular reality they might be interacting with.
So they are more experienced in the sense in this particular reality than some other soul.
They are more experienced in the kind of knowledge required by this particular reality in order to advance. That's what old soul means. It's not really a measure of time. In the same way that we know many humans sometimes misinterpret the phrase light year and think it's a measurement of time when in fact it's a measurement of distance. You understand?
I do.
So, old in this sense is simply a euphemism. It doesn't mean old in terms of time. Does that help?
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Bashar, we have a question from one of our listeners.
All right.
This one is, Bashar, do you have an ego?
We have a sufficient amount of ego to keep us focused in physical reality to whatever degree we wish to be focused in it. But again, we remind you, ego by itself is not a negative term. It's just a focusing mechanism. We do not, however, experience the idea of the negative ego.
Do you experience the full range of emotions as humans do?
We do not experience what you would call the emotions of fear.
Sadness?
We do not experience that.
Anger?
We do not experience that.
Frustration?
We do not experience that. Go on, what else you got?
Elation?
Absolutely.
Do you give yourself a pat on the back when you do a good job?
The enjoyment of doing the job is enough, because it is far more satisfying than any pat on the back could ever be. And we do not need to pat ourselves on the back because we know creation has our back.
Oh. So when we have a more balanced ego structure,
Yes.
how would a human experience themselves?
As a joyful, playful child. Just experiencing themselves rather than thinking about themselves experiencing it.
It's beautiful.
It is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Bashar.
And to you, good day.
Okay, going on the line of your definition of abundance.
Yes.
Can you define need?
Again, we understand that sometimes certain terms in your language may have different meanings, and we can understand that it can be confusing at times, especially when some of these concepts are attempting to be translated into linear space-time reality terminology, which may not be accurately representative of some of the concepts that are being sent, but may be close enough. Need in the context of a positive frame of reference is simply that which is necessary for the continued support of a being. Need in the negative sense is that which the ego may think is required, but may in fact only be the idea of a reinforcement of negative attributes or negative beliefs to aggrandize the self and make the self seem more important.
Okay, so knowing that, need being, I know that I only really need, the very basics of food, and I know you've had a list from before of certain things. You have to sleep a certain amount, you have to dream a certain amount.
Yes.
There are those needs, but then, all of those can be met without really experiencing much of a joyful life.
Oh, they can be, but believe me, if you do them in the purest possible way, breathing is a joy, eating is a joy, sleeping is bliss.
Okay.
So, yes, and again, you can see there is a different bifurcation of the terminology and the different definitions and the subtleties of the definitions in the one word your language has, expressed as the word need.
Yes.
So, yes, you can do them in a sense from a lower vibration. You can do the basics, the fundamentals, but if you only look at them, if you only define those basics as just getting by, then of course you will only experience them in a relatively flat sort of vibration. But if you understand that these basic needs are the very foundation of your ability to have the experience you are having, then they become joyful celebrations. They become things you are grateful for and give gratitude and appreciation to, because they allow you to have the experience that is allowing you to discover more and more and more expansively who you really are. So they all play a part in letting you do that. In other words, you could say, well, the deep sea diver can sort of say, well, yes, I recognize the need for this breathing apparatus. That's all well and good. But when you are 50 feet below, believe me, without that breathing apparatus, suddenly you're very grateful for it. Because it allows you to breathe in an environment that gives you an experience you otherwise could not have. You understand?
Yes, I do.
Does that help?
Yes, following that, for instance, I don't think I need a hung, the musical instrument on the stage, the steel pan.
Yes.
I want one of those, but I don't need one.
Actually, you may find that in the positive context, you actually need one, and that wanting can actually be the negative context.
Okay, yeah, so I don't know how to not judge the want of things.
How about just allowing it to come to you?
Okay.
What about that device gets you so charged up? Gets you so excited?
I have a hard time putting in words, I think. I don't know.
But it does excite you.
Absolutely.
You feel that vibration when you look at it, when you think of it, when you hear it, yes?
Yes.
You feel that connection, yes?
Yes.
Then, that is, along with the vision of yourself playing it, that is the only language needed. The feeling and the picture of you playing it in the ideal scenario is the only language needed, the only symbol needed for you to then hand over to the higher self and then forget about it.
Okay.
Let it go. Trusting that the higher mind now knows what you truly vibrationally need, and that it will then bring about the synchronicities and circumstances necessary for the manifestation of that, if, in fact, that is representative of the highest state. Or it might bring you something you couldn't even imagine that would actually allow you to experience more excitement and more joy than you're imagining in your scenario now. Either way, the point is, if you let that go and then continue to simply act at every given moment on whatever option is the most exciting option you have the ability to act on, you will then be trusting by those actions the higher self, and it is leading you. You will trust that it is leading you through those connections, no matter how winding they may seem, no matter how much they may seem to have nothing to do with your original desire. You will trust that because the excitement is there in each of those acts, it is connected, and you will trust that your higher mind is luring you through those excitements to the idea of the manifestation of any symbol that represents your joy and excitement. Did that make sense?
Perfect sense, yes. When I was as a child, I have a memory of being half asleep, half awake, my bed shaking a lot in the middle, in my dream state kind of. I was just aware of it, but I don't know if it was physical or it was just experience. Can you scan that at all? I don't know if you can provide me any insight on that.
What you're experiencing, and this is actually not that uncommon in your society, is that in those states, you are actually shifting interdimensionally. But if you, let's say, put on the brakes, you hold yourself in idle, in between dimensions, vibrating back and forth, you can actually set up a resonance, a feedback resonance in physical reality that will actually cause the objects to sympathetically vibrate with that feedback resonance. You understand?
Yeah, I remember being almost fearful, though.
Yes, because things were building up. In other words, you have to let the energy go. You have to let yourself make the shift completely. You can't really hold yourself there in between too long. Otherwise, there can be some buildup and some feedback and some blowout of circuits. So the idea of the fear building up was you're reaching the breaking point of your tolerance level. Let it go. That was truly, in that sense, simply a survival mechanism.
I see. All right.
Make sense?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you, Bashar.
Thank you.
Bashar, another question from our listeners. This was about distinguishing between the ego and the higher mind.
Well, we have talked about that already.
Right. And I guess I just wanted to reinforce this idea that in learning to distinguish between the two, if the thoughts that you're receiving are making you feel small, frightened, decreasing your energy, decreasing your spirit, is it a good bet that that is your negative ego.
It is a good bet, but here's the trick. Again, remember, the ego, the negative ego, is clever. The negative ego may give you thoughts that actually make you think you're feeling good. The way to tell the difference, again, is to take that quiet moment and really pay attention to some of the underlying feelings that go with it. In other words, you can actually realize that if the negative ego is feeding you in such a way as to make you think you're feeling good, if you step back and pay attention, you may actually be able to feel the anxiety underlying that. And that's what lets you know it's the negative ego, attempting to trick you into thinking that anxiety is excitement. But generally, eventually, you will find in the physical reflection of your physical reality, in the mirror of physical reality, the negative ego cannot trick you that way for long. Eventually, physical reality, just being a neutral mirror, will show you something isn't working. Therefore, you got to take a step back and look at what you thought was exciting and make sure that the excitement is genuinely coming from the higher mind and was not just a trick of the negative ego to allow you to avoid something you're actually fearful of. So always, even if you can't tell in the moment, always the physical reality will show you something isn't coherent here. Something will not make sense. Something will be out of alignment. Something will be out of whack, as you say. And it gives you the moment to step back and see if in fact there was actually coherency in what you were getting and where it came from. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of
I'm putting it finally this way. Again, when the negative ego generally gives you something that may appear to be excitement, but you find yourself still reacting negatively to circumstances that occur in your outer life, that's a good clue that it wasn't actual excitement, that it was still coming from the negative belief system.
I see.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So that's how you know from the reflection that is given to you. Not that the reflection changes, but how you respond to the idea of what's going on in your physical reality as to whether it was a genuine excitement or simply the idea of a disguised anxiety.
I see. That's very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you approaching your break time? All right.
Thank you, Bashar.
And are you good day?
Thank you. I have a question about your civilization.
Yes.
Do members of your civilization often interact with beings of a much, much, much higher density than your own?
Much, much, much?
Or...
Yes.
Okay, great. If so, can you describe them in a way that we would be able to understand?
Generally speaking, you will find that beings of the idea you call seventh density will be mostly energy constructs, energy forms. They will be patterns of light and electromagnetic or electromagnetheric energy. They may present themselves in a variety of ways that again are representative of the symbols of the consciousness of the other civilization they are communicating with. Therefore, sometimes the beings that we interact with of that level actually appear to us as multifaceted crystals floating in the air. Because that is the overall consensus reality of what they represent, a multifaceted representation or aspect of all that is.
Thank you. What have you learned from them recently which has assisted in your own individual growth and evolution?
Oh, thank you. One of the things we have learned from them recently, as you say, in terms of time, is the idea of how, because in a sense they function as our higher minds, how we can experience their level of reality more and more and more and more in what might be called the lower vibratory levels. What interpretations we can recognize as aspects of their reality that are capable of manifesting in our reality, and to interact with them in ways that would let us know we are interacting with them, even though they will be cloaked in manifestations of our reality. They are telling us how to see through our own symbols more and more and more to the pure essence of their being. This is in your language difficult to describe beyond this point as to how we would perceive their true essence. But the closest approximation perhaps would be as an infinitesimal spark of light in an endless void of emptiness.
Excellent.
And yet, at the same time, knowing that the infinite void of emptiness is also contained in that infinitesimal spark of light.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Another topic. Sorry, I'm dying to know this.